Good afternoon in Mexico City. Good evening in the United Kingdom. We are co-hosting the universities of Sheffield, Hallam in the United Kingdom and UNAM, the National University of Mexico. This event on the German federal election of 2025. We are joined by, scholars from both institutions, by Professor Knut and Matthew Skiba from Sheffield Hallam, as well as Karolina Gilas and I from Facultad de Ciencias Políticas of UNAM, from the Centro de Estudios Políticos, the political science department of our school. Professor Roeder asked me to give a brief introduction. UNAM is Mexico's most important university. It boasts a university, a so-called university city that belongs to the World Heritage of UNESCO. It has several schools, research institutes and centers, as well hosts various cultural institutions such as museums, has its own orchestra, etc., and so on and so forth. I will leave the word to Professor Roeder to introduce Sheffield Hallam University.
Yes, hi, hello everybody. Thanks Mario for this introduction. Warm welcome as well from Sheffield, United Kingdom, South Yorkshire. Matthew and I, we represent Sheffield Hallam University. We are the 14th largest university in the United Kingdom out of 169. Just a bit of statistics there. We have 35,340 students, of whom 4,400 are international students, and we also have actually 4,500 staff members and 708 courses. So we're a very, very large university in the north of England. Basically, we sit in the Sheffield Institute of Social Sciences and Politics. Maybe Matthew, you can say something about history. In a minute, politics, we do offer a bachelor, an undergraduate bachelor, politics and international relations. And then we also have a postgraduate qualification, a master's in international relations and global crisis. That's basically what we are teaching. It's great that we are all here again after, well, not quite 4 years, a little bit less, and we are back together in the same, more or less the same group to discuss the outcome of this year's general election in Germany. So very happy about that. I don't know, maybe I just noticed that we're actually 4 academics based in 2 countries with 4 original different nationalities, but none of us is actually based in Germany, so that's great. So, you know, if somebody can look from the outside in a relevant manner, I think it's us. So just about myself, I'm, originally from Flensburg, which is north of Hamburg, but my entire academic career was basically spent in the United Kingdom and at an American university in Madrid. Right, so much about that one. I don't know if we should now go through the other presenters. Maybe Mario, you can say a bit more about your own background. But I would say now I'd now pass on to Matthew to quickly introduce yourself.
Hello. Yes, like Knut, I'm from Sheffield Hallam University. I'm British. I was brought up in Leicester in the British East Midlands, but I lived in Germany for a good part of the 1990s, where I studied in Berlin at Humboldt University, and I regularly visit Germany and keep a strong eye on German politics. I'm a historian. We offer a degree in history, a bachelor's degree in history at Sheffield Hallam, which I teach on, and also postgraduate research in history, modern history. And my area of specialism is really the First World War in Weimar Germany, but equally, I'm interested in what in Germany is called Geschichtspolitik. I'm interested in the politics of history writing and how that changes with the often fast-moving pace of current politics as well. So, thank you.
Thanks. Karolina.
Hi, hello everyone. I'm Karolina Gilas. I'm Polish-Mexican. I work at the UNAM, at la Universidad Nacional Autónoma de Mexico. I specialize in democracy, political representation, and elections. And I'm really delighted to be here today with you to discuss Germany's election results, my previous neighbors' electoral results, with this very outside view and the broader implications of this election, which I think will be changing a lot European and global relations. So very, very happy to be with you.
Excellent, thank you. Shall I start? And the idea basically was just to kind of run quickly through the results, so we know what we're talking about. Of course, we will have some members in the audience who know a lot about German politics, possibly have been following this very, very closely, just like ourselves. But I guess there will also be other students and other audience members who are just generally interested. So I thought I'd just sort of, have just a couple of slides about the outcomes and just for everybody to know, and then we can move.
If I may say something, please, Professor Roeder?
Of course, Mario, please.
Well, I'm very glad this is the second time that we organize this event in collaboration between the two universities, which I think it's quite an accomplishment. Well, the four of us were in the previous event 4 years ago in 2021. Karolina, Matthew, Knut, and I. We were joined by some colleagues that are not with us today, but I think this is a very important collaboration that we should try to pursue and continue with more frequency, not to wait for another 4 years to organize another event. I'm very glad to have you all, and thanks. Please proceed, Professor Roeder.
Great, thanks. Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. Maybe we should make this a kind of more common occurrence that we meet for the benefit of our students, but also actually for the benefit of ourselves. It's always good to have a lively debate on all kinds of issues. So right now I just need to find the slides. Here we go. Let me just share this, and I think I need to run to the start. Right. Can you just confirm that this works? Does it? Yeah?
Not yet.
Okay, very good. All right then. Okay, so I'll very quickly go through the election from last Sunday, just some general kind of outcomes and some ideas about it. So basically, to sum it up, the winner of the 2025 election has been the Christian Democrats, which is kind of the conservative or the center-right party in Germany. It won the election, and with it, of course, the next chancellor, the next head of government will be Friedrich Merz. Now, the result, 28.5%, one could argue is slightly disappointing. We can say a little bit more about that maybe at a later stage. There were numerous polling organizations that expected 35%, which would have also possibly given it a different dynamic. But anyway, so the Christian Democrats have won and will certainly be part of the next government. The other big takeaway is that the far-right wing Alternative for Germany, Alternative für Deutschland, gained 20.8%, which is another major takeaway. Doesn't really come as a major surprise, but this means that every fifth German actually voted for a far-right party. Again, something I'm sure we will discuss a little bit later. The Social Democrats got 16.4%. The former chancellor who led the three-party traffic coalition, Scholz, he was basically their candidate. Social Democrats have done extremely badly. This is the worst result I read earlier since 1880s, in the 1880s. So clearly not a very good performance, but also expected ultimately. The Greens won 11.6%, so they were the least damaged out of the three parties that were in the previous government, which was the Social Democrats, the Greens, and the FDP. Die Linke, which is the left party, if you like, or more the radical left party, did surprisingly well, gained 8.8%. Then we have a very new party, the Bündnis Sarah Wagenknecht, which is kind of socially conservative, but also kind of has leftish policies when it comes to welfare and redistribution. They gained 4.97%, which is quite tragic, because that means that they will not be entering parliament. The threshold in Germany is, of course, 5% that a party needs to get in order to get 5% of the seats. Otherwise, it doesn't get any seats. And the BSW had 13,500 seats votes missing. Right, and then there's a Liberal Party with 4.3%, which got voted out of parliament. And if we look at the coalition possibilities at the bottom, you can see there aren't really many, which is very different from our discussion we had in 2021. There really is only one, which is basically what was previously called the Grand Coalition, but with the Social Democrats now being relegated to number 3. It is, however, a coalition between the Christian Democrats and the Social Democrats, as nobody wants to work together with the Alternative for Deutschland, the famous firewall or Brandmauer. So we have him here. That is the only option, possibly Friedrich Merz, the next chancellor and head of government. And it's going to be a coalition between the Christian Democrats and the Social Democrats. These are basically the seats, the distribution of the Bundestag. And as you can see, Maria put the SSW, we just had a chat about it before. There's one seat for the Danish minority in northern Germany in the Bundestag. Now, I'm just trying to make one quick, observation here. It looks like Germany will have a stable government of Social Democrats and Christian Democrats. It could have been very, very different. Because if actually, and this is from 10 to 12 at night, and when it still looked that the Bündnis Sarah Wagenknecht would have actually got into parliament, it would have been a very different story ultimately, because with the then distribution of the seats, it means that only a coalition of 3 parties would have actually be able to have a majority, which would have really generated a lot of instability. So while we now look at an election with a clear outcome, it was really, really close. I think that's an important part. Just another couple of takeaways. If we look at the strongest parties and we compare East Germany and West Germany, it's quite shocking to see that the West is mostly a Christian Democrat, black, with a couple of exceptions, while the east of Germany is mostly, has a majority of voters that went for the Alternative for Deutschland. I'm sure we'll discuss that during the next hour of our debate. Clearly a country that is still very much divided 35 years later after unification, and certainly something we might want to talk about. Just another couple of takeaways and preference by age. And you can see that actually young voters between 18 and 24 were far more prone to vote AfD and Linke, the left. So both went to the fringes and both voted parties that were not really in the center as such. While if we talk about voters that are 70 years or older, we can see they are still with the traditional people's parties, if you like, the Christian Democrats and the Social Democrats. So there clearly is also a demographic change taking place. Just another couple of issues. What were the most important issues determining voters' choice? Again, something which we'll probably talk about. Which issue plays the biggest role? And overall, looking at the entire electorate, we can see that domestic security was 18%, social and welfare, immigration 15% of importance, determining the vote, economy 15%, you can look at it in your own time, environment and climate only 13%, big change to what it was like 2021. If we now look at those who voted for the far-right alternative for Germany, we can see that for them, the big issue that made them vote for the AfD was immigration, it was domestic security, and then by a long stretch, nothing before we get to the economy, defense, and cost of living. I think that's quite significant, possibly also for our discussion. And just to add some data to it, if we actually look at the number of asylum seekers and applications, we can see that numbers have actually gone down in 2024 after, of course, they peaked during the Syria crisis, and they peaked in the early days of the Ukraine war. Now, where does the far-right party gets its votes from? And we can see they attract a lot of voters that have not voted before, potential voters, Nichtwähler. But then basically it's kind of throughout all of the parties, maybe the least from the left and from the Greens, voters that were attracted to this year basically select the AfD as their first choice. And just to conclude this was my last slide in 2021, where climate change was the big issue. And basically every single party tried to be somehow greenish. The Greens were fully green, the left was red-green, the Christian Democrats were black-green, SPD, pink, green, and so on and so forth. Only the AfD was zero green. You could say that things have moved on from there, for sure. And of course, the big issue at this election clearly was a different one, and I thought I'd just bring you this one at the same time. Let me just read out what the people are saying on the picture. And it basically is this time they're saying that given the fact that the world is about to collapse, the election campaign has been very exciting and rich in content. And you see all the different posters, and it's the deportation of criminal foreigners was a big issue, of those asylum seekers who weren't successful. So all the posters are saying deportation for more security, deportation for more growth, deportation for more Germany, deportation for more confidence, deportation for more freedom. I don't want to say that it was all about immigration, but it certainly was the big issue at this year's election, right? And I now stop sharing with you. Hold on. Okay, right.
Well then, I think your screen was not shared.
What a shame.
I just wanted to add briefly that, well, global warming still is a big issue. I mean, we're by the end of February and I'm using short sleeves, which in Mexico City is strange at this time of the year, but well, we're having a heat wave here somehow. Okay, so please, shall we proceed with Karolina, perhaps? Please, Karolina.
Okay, sure. I was in Dresden in December, last December, and I saw trees with flowers, which was very unusual for the time of year. So definitely the climate change is still an issue, but I think that migration, economic difficulties, and the war, and this possible war between extending the war beyond Ukraine and going to other European countries, and what's going with NATO is also, I think, like displacing the environmental issues maybe. But I really wanted to talk a little bit about another striking feature for this election, which was the voting patterns and the gender gap we are observing in how especially young women and young men are casting their votes. So among the youngest voters in Germany, those between 18 and 24, we see a very pronounced divergence. Young women have shown strong preference for left-wing progressive platforms, and young men at the same age have leaned far more toward those nationalist platforms, conservative parties. And this is not a small difference, and not just a margin, but we're talking about one party capturing well over 30% of young women's votes, will be Die Linke, the left party. And at the same time, those young men are voting around 25% for AfD, for the far right party. So this is a global gender gap. It's not exclusive of Germany. We can see all over the world that especially young women, the Gen Z women, are lining towards leftist parties, progressive, more feminist parties, while young men are looking for those much more conservative political representations. And young males seem more attracted to those rhetoric around national identity, tighter immigration controls, skepticism toward mainstream institutions. They both are rejecting the old centrist parties, like both are rejecting SPD and Christian democracy, but they're going like in very opposite directions. So I think that it shows some much more deeper divide, something that should bring us to think differently about the electoral dynamics, about how people vote, that we cannot think of women as a monolith, as a one group that leans toward only one political identity. The same is happening with men, although still there is a gap for all the gender, well, all the age groups. There is about 7% gap in support for a populist party between men and women overall. But I think that those younger generations women are much more focused on justice, on equality, on an environmental agenda. So we're dealing with a very complex overlaps of identity, ideology, and generations. So we need to refine the outreach to understand why and how they're voting, and how the future coalition that's the most probable outcome is that we will have the great coalition of SPD, the Social Democratic Party, with the winner, with the Christian Democratic Party. How are they going to answer those such strikingly different approaches to politics today? And another issue, which I think is quite interesting, is also, we've been talking about it for a few minutes before we began the panel, that not only at the right, but also at the left, those populist or far-leaning parties are gaining traction with the voters. And particularly interesting is the case of BSW party, which is, as Knut already said, very left-leaning on the economic issues, but very conservative on the social issues. And its own leader, a woman, and there's still quite strong underrepresentation of women in German politics at the highest levels. So we have a woman at the front of a party, a woman which is also a lesbian, which is in an open public relationship with another woman who is a migrant from Sri Lanka. But at the same time, this is a party which is running on a very anti-migration, anti-LGBT rights. So it's full of contrast, and it's like, I don't know, I only think it's very full of hypocrisy that someone who is in her private life living on one standards are promoting a different standard for the people who they want them to vote for them. So I think it's very, very complex view we can have on the gender and age in this German election. And my last comment, very briefly, on what Knut was saying about this East-West division. I know it seems very striking and strange that we're 40 years, or 35 years after the unification, that we still see these divides. But from a Polish perspective, which I have, I can tell you that those divides, and I think it's a very, very interesting research agenda, if someone wants to pick it up, they really do not disappear. In Poland, we have the same East-West divide after the independence which Poland gained in 1918, so over 100 years ago, and we can still explain the voter alignments, the regional voter alignments on this the previous frontiers from the times of the partitions. So there is, I think, a very, very nice research agenda waiting for us. Thank you.
Okay, I think if Professor Skiba, please, could give us the German election of 2025 seen in historical context, please?
Yes, as a historian, I'm interested in looking at this from a historical perspective, and I'll take three historical points in sort of reverse chronological order. I'll start with what makes this election stand out from other elections since German reunification in 1990. Then I will try and put it in broader historical context of the entire history of the Federal Republic since 1949. And then I will go back to my actual area of expertise, which is the Weimar Republic, which is often the idea of Weimar conditions is often used to describe political chaos and perhaps wrongly political chaos and the idea that Germany is moving away from the stability of the Bonn Republic of the Cold War period to the greater instability of the Weimar period. I'm also going to try and share a few things, so bear with me if it doesn't quite work out as I intend to, but let's I mean, one thing that we really should be looking at is well, I will try and find that map in a moment of what the electoral map of Germany today, because it really does show us very starkly what Germany looked like with the division between East and West today. So just bear with me. Well, I thought I had it ready, but I somehow have lost it. Yeah. Oh. It's coming up. Thanks for your patience. I'm just going to see whether I can find this now. Share. Can we all see that now, that map?
Yes.
Yes, you can. So for those of you listening, you can now see in rather dramatic pictorial form that the blue there represents really the old GDR. It almost looks like a map from the Cold War. And the black with the red is almost the Alta Bundesländer, the old Germany, or the old Federal Republic before 1990. In the old GDR, it is worth mentioning that there are a few constituencies where Die Linke, the left, came out on top. And it's also worth bearing in mind, I don't know whether if I click on this, whether it's going to bring Berlin up. No, it didn't quite bring. If I move.
Yeah,
this.
I think you only have to move it. Like, yeah.
Okay.
Move
and
it.
Then if I can just Berlin is rather different. We can see Berlin here, where the left has won several of the constituencies in the old east of the city, but equally the left won in Neukölln, which is just about where my arrow here is. It won 3 constituencies in old East Berlin, but it also won Neukölln, which is in the old West Berlin. Historically, in the Weimar period, this was a big stronghold for the Communist Party, for the KPD. It's interesting that the left have, whereas other parties seem to have polarized into being either very strong in the East or very strong in the West, Die Linke has probably lost some of its traditional support in the East to the far-right AfD, but it has also, interestingly, it won 8.8% of the vote, which was unexpected. It had an unexpected last-minute surge, relative surge to 8.8%, but also winning quite a few, winning at least 5% in every single land, even in conservative Bavaria. The left has won over 5%, and in Hamburg and Bremen, won nearly 15% of the vote. So there is a sense in which the Die Linke's agenda for greater social justice has actually led it to be less positioned on the East-West divide than other political parties. I would like to emphasize there the difference between Berlin and the rest of Germany in this respect as well. I'm just going to try and take that back here, and then so there's much starker East-West divide, I think, is one of the key things that we would observe from previous elections since 1990. If we looked at similar maps for 1998, when the SPD won, or even 2005, 2013, we would see most of East Germany moving politically with West Germany. When the SPD were ahead, they were ahead in East Germany as well as West Germany, in the Neue Bundesländer as well as the old Bundesländer. And vice versa, when the CDU were emerging as the strongest party, we'd see that swing roughly happening the same in East Germany. So that is quite unique as well. A third unique thing, and I don't fully understand this, I'm not going to spend a long time on it because I don't fully understand it, but the traffic light coalition changed some of the electoral rules, which meant that even outright winners of Wahlkreise, those who came first, can sometimes not get the seat. Now, the CDU wants to change that back to the previous position, where everyone who came first in a Wahlkreis, in a constituency, would be represented. I watched the news last night in Germany, and Tübingen near Stuttgart was mentioned as a place where the CDU won the constituency, but actually Tübingen and several other parts of Germany no longer have a constituency MP. They can be represented by a list MP, but if that person's not from Tübingen at all, it feels like they are not being represented. That was quite strange. And the final thing, if I'm going to share this from the headline of Die Zeit, one of the main newspapers from Hamburg. Can we all see this? The headline today of Die Zeit, bloß nicht scheitern. It seems that a lot is resting on, Knut quite rightly said that probably a stable government between the CDU as a major party and the SPD will emerge from this. But the stakes couldn't be higher. It's being presented in the German media as it cannot be allowed to fail, this gross coalition, not simply because it might mean that the CDU gets voted out of power next time, but it seems, according to this headline, I think it's quite exaggerated myself, that if the new government fails, then the whole political system is in jeopardy, and that Germany might then turn towards what's currently being called Austrian conditions, where in the next election the far right might become the largest party, and the non-far right parties will really have to scrabble very hard to try and put together a coalition to keep them out of power as the strongest party. That is the current situation in Austria, which doesn't have a government yet, even though I think the elections were in September, 4 or 5 months ago, I believe. Yes, people seem to be very concerned that this is the last chance for the mainstream parties. In a further article in Die Zeit this week, it said that we were talking about the Große Koalition, and it said, well, it's no longer a Große Koalition, not only because the SPD is the third rather than the second party, but it said it's now a no-co, a Notkoalition, an emergency coalition, as if we're in emergency conditions, and it's really a binary, either it succeeds or it fails. That's quite a lot of pressure on this new government. It's not just that the government might get voted out, but that the whole system might be placed in jeopardy. If we take a step backwards into time and think about this from the perspective of the entire history of the Bundesrepublik, the Federal Republic since 1949, I think we get a slightly less dramatic picture. Most voters, a good 2/3 of voters in the old West Germany are still voting for centrist parties. Die Linke is still described as extreme to some extent, but really it's an old-fashioned social democratic party now, rather than its ties with the old communist regime are gradually being loosened. And the idea that even 5% of Bavarian voters can vote for it is quite telling to me. That it's still a left party, radical left party, but in fact its program is pretty much where the SPD was 30 years ago. I think that there have been, obviously it's unprecedented to have a far-right party with 1/5 of the votes, although in 1949, the very first election, there were quite a lot of right-wing splinter parties that Konrad Adenauer in his first term of office had to be in coalition government with. The SPD may have done as badly as it did since the 1880s, but I still think it's a very, I don't think it's going to disappear. It's the oldest party in Germany, and it's been in government the longest. It's been in government continuously since, with it, except for a gap between 2009 and 2013, it's been in power as one of the coalition partners for a very long time. So I think that it still has a very vital role to play. Söder, the Bavarian minister-president, partly because he doesn't like the Greens, was talking up the Social Democrats as not only the only mathematically the only possible coalition partner, but politically for him the only possible coalition party as well. There have been, although domestic security was very high on the agenda this time. If we look at the whole of the history of the Federal Republic, I'd remind people that in 1961, election was fought against a few weeks after the building of the Berlin Wall. In 1972, Brandt fought a snap election on in order to try and continue his Ostpolitik, his reaching out to the Eastern Europe. In 2001, the SPD Greens fought an election to keep Germany out of the what I'm calling the Blair Bush War, the second Iraq war. So foreign policy, it's not untypical for big foreign policy issues, security, Ukraine, and so forth, to be divisive in Germany and to be part and parcel of big general elections. And finally, I'm going to go back to the Weimar, which is my real period of expertise. I want to start, are we in the early 30s? Are we going back to when people talk about Weimar conditions, they normally talking about the last 2 or 3 years of the Weimar Republic and the huge number of elections that kept taking place. And although I do hope we meet again before 4 years, I do hope that there isn't an election in Germany, at least another federal election for 4 years. I hope that this Knut coalition does last 4 years. But I don't think we're in the early 30s, except in Berlin. In Berlin, it does look like Weimar mathematically because 5 parties, the Die Linke won in Berlin with 19%, but 5 political parties won at least 15% of the vote. Berlin seems to be very divided, and I expect some of the demographic and gender dynamics we're talking about are particularly poignant, particularly stark in Berlin. But the rest of Germany, I would say that the situation looks more like it did in 1924, when there was a right-wing party, which really was not the Nazi party, but it was called the DNVP, the Deutsche Nationale Volkspartei, a kind of monarchist right-wing party that reached 20% of the vote and wanted to be in coalitions, and in the period 24 to 28 was part of government coalitions with other parties to keep the SPD out of power. But it wasn't allowed to dominate foreign policy. Stresemann, the foreign minister, was able to negotiate all kinds of helpful foreign policy initiatives, which led to rapprochement between Germany and the West during this period. And in 1928, after 4 years of this, the SPD went on to win the election and the NVP lost power. So I would say that there has been in this election, like there was in 1924 in Weimar Germany, a conservative Wende, a conservative shift. But I don't think it's permanent. I think it could quite easily be fleeting, especially if the SPD plays its cards correctly. Perhaps the AfD has reached peak support, and also anyway, it seems that because the Bundeswahlkampfknecht and the FDP didn't get into the Bundestag, there is mathematically the very clear likelihood of a two-party coalition. So I would say yes, it's a conservative agenda, but with all kinds of twists to it. I think the main thing is for this new, if it's call it a Knut coalition if you like, but I think the reason why it's a Knut coalition is not so much to do with the AfD and domestic politics, and much more to do with Trump and how Germany is going to deal with its new foreign policy challenges, particularly in Ukraine, but also in general, now that America looks like it's withdrawing its full-hearted support for European security. So Merz and whoever the SPD produce will need to look for European and not just for German national solutions to this. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much, Matthew. Very, very interesting to put this in historical context, that's for sure. Right, may I invite Dr. Ojeda to...
Thank you so much, Professor Roeder. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm a political scientist, a historian, and also an internationalist. So I'll deal with all three perspectives as briefly as I may, and I will stick to the time that has been afforded to me. I've been asked to talk or discuss or analyze the international repercussions of the German general election outcome. And I'd like to start by saying that Professor Roeder said that what has been the main hype of this election worldwide is the main hype produced by the press and the media, the rise of the AfD. Of course, alarmingly, we could say that yes, that 2 out of 10 Germans voted for the AfD. But conversely, we might say that 8 out of 10 did not vote for the AfD. 8 out of 10 Germans did not vote for the AfD. So this would temper down that alarm, produce let us remember that the press loves to use sound bites because that sells newspapers. No, in that sense, let us recall that much hyped Arab Spring in the early 2010s that was a short-lived and tragically ended Arabic Spring. Because if we put this into context, I find it far more alarming that a little bit more than 5 out of 10 Americans voted for Donald Trump. That is far more catastrophic, and that gives us, we should put in context precisely the outcome of the general election. We know that for historical reasons, of course, it's damning National Socialist past and the Second World War and the Holocaust and so on and so forth. Germans have been hitherto reluctant to assume its inexorable role as a world power, which they are. I mean, it's like a voluntary, it's like a giant voluntarily dwarfing itself, if I may use that expression. But Germany is the 3rd largest economy in the world. Germany is the leading power of the European Union and has been, the mainstay of the Union, along with Paris, with France, the so-called German-French axis. And Germany will have to assume this role. Yesterday, the prestigious Financial Times boasted among its headlines, the US is now the enemy of the West. And well, we've seen after Vice President's threatening speech in Munich, and the presidential Donald Trump's blackmail to Ukraine, extorting its resources and so on and so forth. That's the Große Koalition is destined to become the main resistance to this onslaught to the international global order. The European Union has to assume its role, and hopefully this will accelerate. Perhaps I'm being a bit too utopian. Professor Skiba and Professor Roeder might contradict me that, perhaps it might accelerate Britain's re-entry into the European Union. We've seen Prime Minister Starmer rearming and also assuming this leadership that will have to be shared by Emmanuel Macron, by Keir Starmer, and by Friedrich Merz, which, I felt very relieved. Merz briefly flirted with AfD in getting a vote on harder immigration legislation in the Bundestag, but quickly retreated from this and reinstated his staunch commitment to the Brandmauer, to the firewall, to the cordon sanitaire that all mainstream German parties have agreed to against the entry of extremist forces such as the Alternative für Deutschland to government, and has said that he has no intention of establishing a coalition with Alice Weidel, and that he most likely will establish a Große Koalition, a great coalition with the German Social Democrats, the SPD. He also was very firm in its commitment to achieve or to secure Europe's independence from the United States step by step. This obviously will have to do with a dramatic increase in defense expenditure from Germany, and Germany having to rearm in a totally different context, into a totally different global context. It's been 80 years since the end of the World War, and the tables have turned dramatically. I would ask, perhaps with a bit of overstatement, but who are the Nazis now? Washington or Berlin? I'd say that's the former rather than the latter, and this will precipitate Germany's assuming this role that has refused to do so hitherto, but it will have to, and let's hope that Britain joins back the European Union eventually, and European institutions. With regards to the Eastern-Western divide, I had a conversation yesterday with Professor Roeder that I've read some views, and Professor Skiba might be have more expertise to talk to us about this, that this predates the post-45 division of Germany between the Deutsche Demokratische Republik and the Bundesrepublik Deutschland, the German Federal Republic and the German Democratic Republic, and has to do more with the fact that Western Germany was more exposed to the Enlightenment ideas to the French Revolution, to the Industrial Revolution, than was Eastern Germany. And well, the fact that, for instance, there was this controversy in the 19th century between the rising German bourgeoisie and the Junkers in East Germany, that well, the Junkers were protectionists because they wanted a closed market to reserve well, the consumption to their grain production based on a feudal model of production, and the Western German bourgeoisie allied to the German working class, wanting, well, promoting or championing free trade, well, not only for German industries to export, but also for the German working class to benefit from lower prices of grain coming from the US, Midwest, or Russia. And well, this idea led me to read an article that was published in Foreign Policy 7 years ago, a bit less than 7 years ago, by David Clay Large, a senior fellow from the Institute of European Studies at the University of California, Berkeley, which is entitled precisely, East Germany's far-right problem is 300 years old. There are very deep historical reasons why far-right resentment has flourished in Eastern Germany. Well, I wanted to refer to this reading. And well, for Latin America, from a Latin American perspective, it is crucial that the European Union assumes its role as a liberal democratic beacon in an era of uncertainty, in an era of rising illiberal democracies, to put it mildly, or to outright autocratic regimes rising, well, in places as diverse as India, China, Russia, Turkey, our own region as well. We have Bolsonaro in the past in Brazil, etc., etc. And to assume its role as a reference and a role model in defense of the liberal international order. I'll leave it to that.
Right, thank you very much, Mario. There was a lot in there. We have a couple of list of things we want to discuss. And at some stage I was saying you're already talking about predictions for 2029, but then we went back. So I don't know, Matthew, you want to respond directly to that kind of idea that there's such a historic precedent?
Yeah, just very briefly, Mario, that's part of what you say is correct about the Old East, but we would need to differentiate between different parts of the East. So if we were looking at an electoral map from 2017 or 2021, we'd see that the AfD had particularly captured Saxony and Thuringia, which are historically red areas. Das Rote Sachsen was Das Sächsische Manchester, the textile industry, which has been very badly deindustrialized since the end of the GDR. And that doesn't quite fit with your model. The SPD and then in the Weimar period, the KPD were very strong parties in Chemnitz, in Halle, in Leipzig, in these places which have been for a while now strong support of the AfD. Ironically, in the post-reunification period, the SPD did best in Mecklenburg-Vorpommern, which is the part of Germany, Stettin, near Stettin, that I think you're talking about, the more rural agricultural, historically the more Prussian East than Saxony and Thuringia. And I think we do need to bear in mind more recent events, the deindustrialization of Saxony and Thuringia, and the feeling that those areas have been particularly badly lost out economically during the reunification. And there is some cultural wars going on as well. There was a rather nasty racist riot in Chemnitz in Saxony. Maybe it was before the previous election, a few years ago. And the Chemnitz police were accused of not dealing with this too quickly, and the Bundespolizei, the federal police, had to come in and stop the anti-foreigner riots in Chemnitz. And West German newspapers carried headlines saying, well, we can integrate the Syrians, but we'll never be able to integrate the Saxons, which is quite which to me, having lived in Germany in the early 90s when Aussies and Wesses was talked about constantly, but I thought it disappeared. That moment, I think it was in about 2019, I thought, gosh, that's really quite stark, drawing differences between East and West. That's cultural war, that's identity politics, but I still think it's very, very strong. Dresden, capital of Saxony, used to be called the Tal der Ahnungslosen, the Valley of the Clueless, because in the GDR times, Western television couldn't be captured there compared to other places. And I do think that some of this is more recent than the 300 years history. And a lot of it, I think, is in Saxony and Thuringia. What I can't explain is why it's moved to the north of the old GDR, to Mecklenburg-Vorpommern and other places where now the AfD seems to have captured the whole of the former GDR, Berlin accepted and Leipzig accepted.
Thank you.
Right. Okay. Great. I mean, that's kind of, links in with the kind of historic perspective there. I don't know. I mean, Karolina, of course, you were talking about the kind of gender issue. I don't know if there's anything specific between the East and the West here in that respect. I don't know if there's anything more you'd like to add to this kind of East-West division.
I really wanted to, I'm not sure because we are a little bit over time and we have like a set of another 5-6 issues we wanted to talk about. So if it's okay with you, I'd like to talk about some highlights I still see in this election. And something I was thinking to say at our concluding remarks, but I think we won't have any concluding remarks, so I'll say it just directly. I feel you're three quite optimistic, and I must confess, and it's not very academic way to say that, but I'm really afraid. I'm scared about what's going on, not only in Germany, but in broader context on what's going on in Europe. I think that this very strong rejection of the traffic light coalition, the three parties are the biggest losers of this election, are a strong message from the voters that are not happy with the way the things are going. And on the one side, the fact that SPD, rejected so strongly by the voters, will still be a governing party, because I really think there is no other way, no other coalition. I've been like playing with the numbers for a while, and this is the only most logical solution is this gross coalition between CDU, CSU, and SPD. This is the minimal winning coalition with 328 votes, which is barely 12 above the 50% threshold. And still, this coalition will really require substantial ideological compromise on both sides. They are not so closed on most of the issues. The electorate, I think, is looking for a different approach to politics, and we have this coalition, this new government, really is facing huge challenges in immigration. I think that not only far right, but also radical parties just are rising in Germany. And if we just do the math, the AfD and BSW are about 25%. So I know that Mario said just 8 in 10 have not voted AfD, but it's still a very large proportion of electorate who is looking for a different approach to immigration issues. And I really feel that if the government won't change the stance, won't change the migration policies, The risk is what Matthew was saying before, that maybe the electorate will move even farther to the right for the next elections, and will be going to this Austrian scenario, which I think any one of us wants to happen. So it's very probable they will have to push for some stricter, more nuanced immigration controls. Also, there is a very challenging economic situation. At the same time, Germany needs to figure out how to get back on the road towards economic growth. Its economic is stagnant. It's not working appropriately in the current times and facing current challenges. Some strange things, I think, are happening, which I do not quite understand, like why the issues that usually and traditionally worked in Germany aren't working anymore. Like the trains are getting late, and streets are not as clean as they used to be. So there are a lot of very subtle things that are happening. At the same time, Germany has very strict constitutional rules on the debt, on the economic debt. And it needs to change the stance on the security. All the European countries need to spend much more on tanks and guns and all the other stuff. Europe needs to secure itself without relying so much on the US as it did during all the post-war period. So I really do not see this as an easy future, So there are a lot of challenges, very little like positives around Europe and Germany in particular. It's not only German problem, it's really European problem at the moment. It's an aging continent. It's a continent which is losing in economic battle with China, with other countries. So it's such a lot of things to get a handle on that I'm not really sure if this government and the Merz leadership will really be up to this challenge. So looking at the situation, looking at what's happening in the US, in Russia, I'm really scared. I'm really worried about the future, short and medium-term future of Germany and of Europe. So with all the best wishes, I really have those maybe not so academical worries.
Thanks, Karolina. If I may quickly just get in there for a second. I mean, of course, it links in with Matthew's, it's all up for grabs now. And I think that's kind of the issue, isn't it? We just really don't know. There's so many things in flux at the moment. That it's very difficult to say. I mean, I think regarding Germany, I think, one of our questions, we had the traffic light coalition, what went wrong? And I think what really went wrong, a lot of the circumstances went wrong, ultimately. A coalition that was basically went bust when the Constitutional Court decided that there was certainly billions missing in the budget that had been repurposed from the Corona funding, and suddenly a government running out of money, and of course an economic model that didn't work any longer, right? And the model, of course, was you sell your products, you're very export driven to China, and at the same time you can compete with everybody due to very cheap energy supplies from Russia. And I think that's really, in all fairness to Olaf Scholz, I think that's really what the government has had to deal with. And if you look at Robert Habeck, the economics minister, I mean, a green minister that suddenly travels to Dubai and tries to do all kinds of deals in order to get gas, of all places, in order to keep the German economy going. I mean, everybody's really kind of, stretch themselves very, very far there. I mean, I totally agree with you, of course. We just don't know exactly what's going to happen. And if this government isn't able to deliver, then of course we're going to go the way we go anywhere else. And of course it's strategically very easy for the far right to just consistently complain and say, look, things are not getting any better. But of course has a lot to do with perception as well, hasn't it? So I've got some good friends in East Germany, and I mean, I'm not joking, the fear level of letting your children go to school, for instance, was unprecedented. And I think to some extent also a little bit unrealistic. But of course, that's of course how right-wing campaigning works ultimately. And of course, even for the election now, we've had these kind of knife attacks, 2 or 3, some really crazy ones. A Syrian AfD fan who wanted to warn us of Islam by driving into a group of Germans and killing people. I mean, it's been very, very crazy. So I think the big hope, and I'll leave it at that, is that, of course, even though it's been quite lucky, and that was, of course, one of the arguments I was making, with 13,500 votes missing for the Bündnis Sarah Wagenknecht, now actually generating at least a majority of 2 center parties. I think everybody will have to hope that for the next 4 years, time will be bought. And it's 4 years, hopefully when we meet here again in 4 years' time, there will not be a Ukraine war any longer, which will really, of course, relax also the argument over immigration. It's been quite something to have 1 million of Syrians. And now, having another 1 million Ukrainians, and as welcome as they will be, of course, they have put pressure on a public system that will eventually possibly deal and cope with it. But for the time being, I think this overall sensation and crisis mood, the economy isn't working because of the model, and there are lots of immigrants that we just can't cope with it any longer. And I think we just have to hope that we now have a phase of calm after having had a government that was just at each other's throats. And I think that's one thing we know. If you have a government where basically the coalition partners agree on something and then one of them immediately destroys what they've just achieved, can't work very well. So confidence in politics next to zero within a major crisis. And of course, that's being thrown up by Trump as well now. So maybe in that respect, whatever, 5 out of 10 isn't, 2 out of 10 isn't actually too bad. And precisely as Mario, as Professor Ojeda was saying, maybe actually the 80% that stayed sane might actually ultimately, guarantee that we do have 4 years to make a difference.
Well, I would like to add about this. Well, what went wrong? Well, it turned out that the FDP, the so-called centrists, weren't as centrist as we expected, but rather were far more right-wing than the CDU, I would say. So that destroyed. It was Christian Lindner who destroyed the streetlight coalition and forced to a snap election on February. And he has paid that price. His political career is over. It's finished for him. I do agree with Professor Gilas and Professor Roeder in that we're living in a flux in very dangerous times. Let us remember that Chinese curse, may you live interesting times. Yes, we are living. I see with some nostalgia the boring times of the Cold War that were more predictable than this uncertainty that really puts us on the verge of a heart attack every single minute. Now with this unpredictable firebrand in the American presidency wanting to take over Greenland, the Panama, Canada, and build Riviera in Gaza, and so on and so forth. The ravings of a lunatic that have become our daily fare of international politics. So, yes, we're dealing with very extreme conditions, bordering on lunacy. So, yes, we'll have to expect some rationality and some sense. It's the 70 plus were the sobering force. I take this, what Professor Roeder said, that German youth went to the fringes, which is a bit scary for what the future may bring to Germany in that sense. Let us hope that they will think it over in the next 4 years. And yes, strange things have happened, and we've talked about this. Well, Europe seems to be caught between all this ultra right-wing lunatics like Geert Wilders or like AFD or Marine Le Pen or Giorgia Meloni, a fascist in power in Italy, Viktor Orban, etc. And well, this neo-Stalinist loonies too. I mean, Podemos in Spain, or Jeremy Corbyn, or Mélenchon, which I mean, spewing this Stalinist rancid discourses of the 1970s, defending Putin, lashing out against Zelensky, and now in coalition with Trump. So I mean, the horseshoe theory is being validated every single day. You know, I mean, will we see a Podemos Vox coalition in Spain, the sort of re-edition of the Molotov von Ribbentrop steel pact in Spanish politics, or will we see? We've seen Marine Le Pen and Mélenchon rallying against Macron. So I mean, I'm ready. But we are living under interesting times. Then, and well, hard pressed between all this neo-Stalinist, neo-fascist, and this Islamist radicals, all these attacks which seem staged somehow by I mean, I have not a conspiratorial mind, but I cannot fail to see Putin's hand in these attacks. According to the German police, many of these supposed immigrants, Syrian or Afghans or loony Saudis that are Islamophobic, but then go and try to ascertain their Islamophobia by killing German people, which sounds bizarre to say the least. Well, this seems like provocations, no? We have to have a clinical eye to see what's going on. Who's to what purposes are these attacks serving? Of course, to fan xenophobic sentiment and to promote extreme forces like AFD, which I cannot fail to see that they are, for all their ultra right-wing proclamations, they are highly sympathetic to the Kremlin, on the other hand. Well, which, by the way, is ultra right-wing as well. Thank you.
I'm going to push back a little bit and be a little bit more optimistic. We're assuming, for good reason, that any grand coalition will be pushed around by events beyond its control, and there are lots of them. But let's think about what is in their control. The SPD should definitely insist on the Brandmauer as an absolute condition of any coalition with the CDU, an absolute commitment, not only at Bund level, but at land level, Brandmauer. And secondly, they should go right the way back to almost the beginning of Scholz's chancellorship and talk about the Zeitenwende in regard to security and peace in Europe, and hold fast to those two things which have the support of about 65% of the German electorate, and for the SPD, that was the only party who voted against the Enabling Act in 1933, the Brandmauer has a great deal of credibility. The Green Party will presumably be out of the coalition, but it will still be an important force, as will environmentalism in German politics. One of the interesting things to me is that the Green Party managed to hold up most of its vote, in spite of the fact that until recently, it was the party that was being most attacked, both by the extreme right, by Söder in Bavaria, by Bündnis Sarah Wagenknecht. Her whole book, Die Gerechtigten, was really against the Greens. Interesting, I remember when the Greens were founded, and in the 80s, they were criticized for challenging the establishment by wearing jeans and trainers in the Bundestag. But during the during the traffic light coalition, the Greens almost became the establishment, didn't they? They ceased to be the radicals. They were Annalena Baerbock almost became, I'm exaggerating, but almost became a militarist in terms of her support for Ukraine and for rearmament, going well beyond what the SPD was saying. But they have a solid 12% of support, especially among graduates. I really can't see where the AfD is going to get more votes in Germany. Mario mentioned the 50% almost who voted for Trump. In France, 44% voted for Marine Le Pen. Perhaps I'm being too optimistic, but I don't think that's going to happen in Germany to the same extent. As a historian, I don't think that can happen. Germany might be the one country where there is a limit to how far right parties can go, and also the AfD itself is unstable. We talked about all the hypocrisies in Alice Weidel, but the biggest one to me, as a centrist, the biggest argument for her hypocrisy is that she lives in Switzerland. And several of her close party colleagues have been found to be in cahoots with China or Russia, not just ideologically, but materially, taking all kinds of things going on there that are not within the tradition of German foreign policy and German Euro-centeredness. So they may mess up themselves. They've had enough leaders, and Alice Weidel might not be the leader for that much longer. They keep changing their leader all the time, the type of leader they have. It's an unstable party as far as I can see, with a lot of contradictions within it, and I don't think that it has the same potential as the FPÖ does in Austria. But maybe I'm being too optimistic.
I agree with Matthew on that.
I hope you're both right. I pray for that. I hope my fears will be sustained in the future. But I don't know, the recent politics have disappointed so much, so broadly and so frequently all over the world. That I'm not very optimistic, but I really truly hope you're right.
Yeah, maybe one more thing quickly to look at, all of us, is, of course, who is the new leader, Friedrich Merz? And maybe it is actually good news that he is in a coalition with the Social Democrats. So traditionally, he will have to watch what he is saying. And, there will be arrangements that, as Matthew was mentioning, that the Brandmauer will definitely continue to exist. And of course, what we've heard so far, the election campaign is over now. It has been quite surprising, hasn't it? In terms also of his, as a big transatlanticist fan, basically, of the US, how Merz has been quite critical and quite outspoken. And I mean, funnily enough, there is a tradition within his party. And even though he might be very different from Merkel, I mean, there are real strong interests, of course, to oppose some of these threats that have been put against Germany. I mean, a nation that is very export orientated would suffer the most if Europe isn't actually able to kind of find, a common voice. I think it's going to be, of course, it's a very kind of narrow field with not upsetting the United States at a time where that could have severe consequences. But I think the bottom line is, will there be a German government that will finally actually a little bit more outspoken and ultimately also be more pro-EU again? And we've seen that really didn't work, surprisingly enough, with Scholz, who did not get on with Macron and really wasn't, didn't have very much warm relations. They also had to be very careful. And then, of course, was governing a government in Germany that could never make up its mind because a coalition could fall apart. So in that respect, of course, possibly the change of government away from the traffic light might mean that Germany and the German government can actually play a more productive role again, which it just hadn't been able to for the last 3 years.
Thank you very much. I'm afraid I'm going to have to go now. But to repeat two things, I do hope that we meet again before 4 years. But I very much hope that it's not because of a new federal election in Germany, that I hope that there's a stable government in Germany for the next 4 years. Thank you. I've very much enjoyed it. I think it's a very good group that we've got, and it's been very interesting to hear all your views and takes on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Skiba. Till the next one, which I hope will be very soon.
Thank you.
Okay, the Germany one in 4 years' time, the next one very soon, Matthew. I think that's a good idea.
Okay. Goodbye. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Right, I think Karolina and Martin.
Recording stopped.
Ah, okay.
Okay. Well, I wanted to say that
Recording in progress.
Muchas gracias. Thank you. Okay, we carry on. We continue. Professor Skiba has left us because he had another engagement, but we carry on. Professor Gilas, if you could take on that, then I would.
okay. Well, I think that also very well interesting and issue we will have to follow up very closely is how this coalition building will go on. So I was reviewing some data, and yeah, the average time since 1990, so this post-unification Germany, it takes 70 days, so a little bit over 2 months from the point of the election day to the swearing of the new government. But when there was this große coalition, so CDU, CSU, SPD, it usually takes longer. It took almost 3 months in 2013. It took about 5, almost 6 months in 2017. So we hope it won't take so long. I think that also this German internal situation as well as international situation are not favorable. So for those two parties to take so long to process their differences, I think that the best outcome would be to try to do it quickly, although we recognize the difficulties it takes to reconcile those two agendas, and probably this capacity of Merz to articulate a new government, a coalition, how long will it take, also will tell us a lot about his leadership qualities, his ability to join and to put some specific issues first. So I think we won't have all the answers today for now. We really still have to have very close look on what's going on in Germany, and in the relation of what Matthew, Mario, and Knut was telling before, how we will play also with its European partners. There is a lot of pressure on Ukraine today. We just heard yesterday, today about the deal the US imposed on Ukraine, and there will be probably a strong pressure to try to end the war from the US. So there is very pressing questions on how Europe will respond to that, if there will be some kind of peacekeeping operation, financed or conducted by European countries, military forces, what role Germany will play in this. I think there's a lot to watch for the next weeks and months. So I have to say that I know I said I'm really worried, I'm scared, and that's true, but I still have a lot of faith in German rationality and capacity to engage, to sustain dialogue, and to be this very responsible leader of European Union. And I hope that Germany will retake the role it played so well during Angela Merkel era. So let's hope Merz will rise up to this challenge.
Well, I would like to take on that. I reiterate my optimism. As I've said, the tables have turned. Now Germany, Germans seem to me to have been vaccinated by their traumatic history, and have become staunch defenders of the international liberal order in the main. And well, they have ascertained that role by voting mainly by the sovereign moderate forces, well, the CDU, the SPD, and the Greens, which are, I would say that center-right, center-left options, and which, as we said, well, democracy is not exciting. Excitement comes from the fringes, from the most extreme forces. I'd rather live under boring times than under thrilling times, to put it mildly. Concerning the new leadership, well, Friedrich Merz, I've tried to catch up with his figure. He was not very familiar to me. Well, he was junior or deputy chancellor with Angela Merkel. They had a rivalry as heirs to Helmut Kohl's long legacy or long shadow, and in the end, ultimately, Angela Merkel prevailed over Merz. Merz gave up politics for a while. He went back to his business-oriented career as a member of the board of the German branch of BlackRock. Then, well, came back as leader of the opposition to the Streetlight Coalition, took back his role as well, became the leader of the CDU. Briefly or recently, people dreaded that he might fall into the temptation of joining forces with AfD. He did well, mainly because of this voting for strict migration laws in the Bundestag. Then he retracted and stressed that he was going to reinforce the Brandmauer, the firewall, the cordon sanitaire of the mainstream parties on the French AfD. I am optimistic about him. I think he could reassume this leadership. As Professor Roeder mentioned, the relation between Emmanuel Macron and Olaf Scholz was not as well what we would have wished, and perhaps under Merz, this Franco-German friendship be revived. I think we'll have to be very watchful. Professor Roeder might give us some insights. Very watchful on the future role of still Defense Minister Boris Pistorius, who will no doubt play a leading role in the Great Coalition government, now that Olaf Scholz has announced that he'll step down and that he will not join that Great Coalition as a minister, which will make sense. He was chancellor. Well, a downward promotion or a demotion doesn't seem very honorable. So, well, yes, we will have to be very watchful of these two figures, Boris Pistorius and Friedrich Merz, which will be, of course, the main leaders of this great coalition. And the role that they will play, I have no doubts that they will play a role as advocates and defenders of the international liberal order and of liberal democracy itself in Europe, in the European Union, and in Europe itself. I am optimistic about Merz. I think he is a decent man. I mean, he's far more conservative than Merkel is, but well, Merkel surprised us all. We didn't expect Merkel to at the outset of her leadership, we didn't expect her to be that progressive. Let us remember that, well, in her early days with Finance Minister Schäuble, she was a leading figure of extreme austerity in the in the European Union. Well, the Greeks didn't like it. The Portuguese didn't like her very much, so the Spaniards didn't. They were infamously called the pigs for a while. Portugal, Ireland, Greece, and Spain, let us recall that. And then she evolved, perhaps a bit too much, I would say, because in defense of Germany, well, to take a contingent of 1.5 million immigrants at a single go in such a short time, no country can do that with a backlash taking place. I mean, when I say no country, not even the United States, not even Canada, I mean, taking 1.5 million refugees in a single go will, of course, had an impact, especially from a country that had been close to migration so staunchly as the German Federal Republic had been. So instead of doing it gradually, they took it for humanitarian reasons very swiftly, of course, for German economic necessities. I mean, the inverted demographic pyramid in Germany is a problem. We've seen that there's a huge shortage of labor force, especially in the health sector. There's a need for doctors and nurses coming from the outside world, and Germany has been very generous in opening up also its borders, and also for pragmatical reasons as well. Thank you.
Yeah, great. I mean, it sounds good, you know, towards the end of our meeting. It's all getting quite positive, we're all quite hopeful. And of course, we have to, and there's just no choice about that. And I think, you know, there are 3 points I'd like to make towards the end from my side. Of course, the first one, I think we're all agreeing on that one. Karolina, you're absolutely right. Germany has a tradition that these coalition agreements are super ultra detailed up to the last dot of the sentence and, you know, consist of 100 pages. There's no time for that. So I think with this very unprecedented time, we will already see if there is any future in this government by them actually agreeing quite quickly. So if this is being done before Easter, we are on to something here and also to a solution. If the bickering starts, it might get very, very difficult. And of course, there's one person we also need to add to this equation here, which is next to Pistorius. I'm not quite sure what role he will play, which is of course Lars Klingbeil, who has just been confirmed as the new parliamentary party leader. He is also the SPD leader as such, and he is quite a controversial figure and actually has already announced that he's going to, you know, drive a very hard bargain. So we just have to wait and see how that works out. So I think we'll know so much more in 2 or 3 weeks' time when we see what's happening. And I mean, on one more note, also maybe, Karolina, that's an important one. It's not just Germany and France. It really it requires a revival of the so-called Weimar Triangle of France, Germany, and Poland, as with the UK having left being three very, very big and important countries with kind of progressive pro-European governments as such. And of course, it's going to be very interesting to see if Merz is able to revive kind of these kind of pro-integrationist aspects. And maybe on a more realistic note, one wonders how that's going to work. I mean, if Europe is going to work more on defense, there are certain countries that may not necessarily be part of this. And I wonder how intergovernmental the whole cooperation will have to be, because, of course, out of the 27, there are certain countries that are zero interested in actually driving this any further, or countries that are very Putin-friendly, so to speak. So it's going to be very interesting to see. I think we will know, honestly, by Easter, where this new German government is moving very differently to the traffic light, where we had to wait until the Ukraine war and the Constitutional Court basically, destroying any kind of commonality between the three parties. Here, it's going to be possibly, revealed quite quickly if our optimism we are all identifying here is justified or not. Let's wait and see.
Well, I think there are quite a lot of possibilities to like revive or make stronger this Weimar Triangle, as Macron in France is strongly pro-Ukrainian. He's advocating for this stronger alliance. Poland has been doing this also during the last years, very pro-Ukrainian stance. And well, I must say Polish government has increased defense spending, which are the highest now, not only Europe, but in all NATO, with 5% of GDP. However, Poland also at the point, at least for next 2.5 months, is also in a quite fragile positions, and it's heading toward the presidential election, which will be held in May, mid-May, May 18. And I was like observing that the current government is very cautious, taking position on the possible military intervention or peacekeeping intervention in Ukraine. I think its true position is in favor of such a decision. However, it may be electorally priceless. So I think they're keeping its position not so clear on maneuvering on this issue, as they do not want to debilitate the chances that this governing coalition presidential candidate, which is Trzaskowski, the center right, will get the presidency, because otherwise, if it stays with the same party which held it now, which is this Justice and Law and Justice Party, it won't be the best outcome for Poland and for this regional cooperation. But I hope it won't happen this way. I hope Trzaskowski will win, and we'll have again a much stronger stance on Ukraine. And well, the same happens in Germany and in all other countries in Europe. Poland also have received about 1 million of Ukrainian refugees since the beginning of the war. And there are some parts of society which are maybe not so thrilled to keep spending as much Poland is spending on the help to Ukraine. But still, I think this Weimar Triangle has a very high potential to lead the stronger military and defense cohesion in Europe. And I also think that both Baltic countries and even Scandinavian countries are today in a different position that they usually have been, and maybe also much more interested in investing more and cooperating more in this defense issues than south of Europe, for example. So I think there's some facts that may point us towards some more optimistic conclusions, but I'm still with some reserves. But I think it's inevitable for Europe to construct stronger autonomy in front of United States and taking its own defense in her own hands. I think there is no other way. I hope it won't mean that NATO will fall apart. I think this will be really tragic outcome of Trump government. But independently of what's going on with NATO as a whole, I think that the current geopolitical situation may be a very strong reason to strengthen European cooperation, especially in international politics.
Okay, I would like, well, we've seen that Finland and Sweden, formerly neutral countries, joined NATO, and will they have, will join in the sustenance, in the financial sustenance of, and the military sustenance of NATO. I think, well, a European defense policy is looming in the horizon. It has been forced upon by the abandonment of the United States. This will precipitate and accelerate events, whether Europe likes it or not. Definitely, the former Warsaw Pact members of NATO will play an increasing role. They are hard-pressed. Poland, the Baltics, and well, Finland and Sweden are on the front line, so they'll be, of course, hardly pressed to accelerate these matches more than would Spain, Portugal, or Italy for that matter. And then, well, as Professor Gilas pointedly said, France has been very firm in the defense of Ukraine, and well, I think Europe will have to be, because its security is clearly at stake. That is no doubt about it. I think we have to wrap it up. We have a question from Eric Ode, which I think is a student of yours, Professor Roeder. Am I correct? Yes, okay. Eric asks, will Friedrich Merz be able to stand by the statements, which is basically a stand against Trump's approach to Europe and support for Putin he has made in the past 2 days when he is finally confirmed? Would you like any of you to take that?
I mean, your guess is as good as mine. For the time being, the noises are made. I think it's such a volatile situation at the moment. We just have to wait and see what's happening. I mean, to be honest, now seeing that Zelensky is traveling to Washington and, seeing how that suddenly is working out, and nobody would have predicted that 5 days ago. But I think at the end of the day, of course, Friedrich Merz, will stand up for German interests. It is nevertheless the third largest economy, and of course it's the leading economy in the European Union. So a lot stands and falls with that. So I guess if not Merz, who else? So my guess would be that he will operate within the European interest. That's certainly the noises he's made so far by arguing that we need to find our new independence. Let's just wait and see, but I wouldn't be too negative about that.
Yeah, I also hope that he will keep the stand, and I think that to anyone who knows a little bit about European history, it's more than evident that Russia will, well, the Russian goal is not only to keep the territorial gains it has at the moment in Ukraine, but the ultimate goal is to control Ukraine, to convert Ukraine in second Belarusia, and then to expand forward. I think that Putin has said it very clearly over the years how he sees geopolitical relations in Europe and all over the world, and this. The fall of the Soviet Union was the greatest tragedy of the 20th century. I think we're quite in different positions on that, and I think that for all the Europe, it should be really absolutely clear that there won't be peace if Ukraine is sacrificed. It will be just repeating the history, and we already know how it ends. It will end with a war's war. So I hope that this rationality that sometimes, well, what they say, if you want peace, prepare for war, and all those wisdom we have from the history will be something that guides merit government.
Okay, I would like to ask our host, Patricia from Facultad de Ciencias Políticas y Sociales, UNAM, if she could open up the panel for questions from the audience, from our students from UNAM and Sheffield Hallam, please. Are there any questions from the audience?
Well, we've been running for 1 hour and 50 minutes. So, you know, for the sanity of our students, maybe.
Let's leave it at that. Okay. Before ending this this conference, I would like to congratulate myself for this joint initiative from Sheffield Hallam University in the United Kingdom and the Facultad de Ciencias Políticas y Sociales de la Universidad Nacional Autónoma de México for this initiative, which is the second instance of our cooperation that I think we should strengthen and co-organize further events together very soon. And well, I would like to thank Professor Gilas, Professor Roeder, and Professor Skiba for their kind and generous collaboration with the organization of this event.
Yeah, may I just add, it's been a real pleasure meeting you again and talking to you again, and let's hope we can repeat this again for the benefit of ourselves and of course of those who might have listened in. So it's been a real pleasure, and it's a really, well, interesting time, Maria, as you were saying. Hopefully it's also going to be a good time where a lot of challenges will be dealt with in a positive manner, and I'm glad to see that we're all kind of on the page of hopefulness that things will be better soonish, and we'll know more where things will go towards. Thank you so much.
This event remains at the page of Centro de Estudios Políticos YouTube page for the benefit of others who couldn't see it live, but may see it later. Please.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
It is.